All right, today we are diving into a guide to human psychology that's about 2,500 years old, but you're going to see it feels like it could have been written yesterday. It's basically a practical map for our very complex inner lives. So let's get right into it.
So our whole story kicks off with this really powerful observation from a guy named Pessa, who is an expert elephant trainer. He's looking at people, all our hidden motivations, our inner conflicts, our contradictions, and he compares us to this dense, tangled up mess of branches. But animals? He said they were like an open field, simple, direct, you can see what's going on. And I think we can all relate to that feeling, can't we?
Pessa's words really get you thinking, right? They bring up a question that's just as real for us today as it was thousands of years ago. Why is everything inside our heads so messy sometimes? And, way more importantly, is there a roadmap to help us get out of that thicket and find our way into that open field?
Well, according to this text, the Buddha's answer wasn't some super complex philosophical theory. Nope. Instead, he gave Pizza this simple, really elegant framework of 4 basic human profiles, 4 ways that people tend to approach their lives, their struggles, and their search for happiness.
But here's the thing. To truly understand what these profiles mean, we can't just look at the modern translations. We've got to get to the original meaning. So, for this explainer, we're going to use this special 3-step visual translation process to really uncover the amazing ideas packed into the ancient language.
Here's how it's going to work. First, we'll look at the common modern translation, like what you'd find in a dictionary. Then, we're going to dig way down into the root of the original Pali word to find out what it really meant. And finally, we'll bring that core idea to life visually, so you can actually see what it's all about.
And here they are, the 4 profiles. 3 of them describe a life caught up in conflict, what the text calls torment, while the 4th one shows us a way out. Let's start with the ones who were stuck in that thicket.
Okay, so these first 3 profiles are all defined by this idea of tormenting. They basically represent the different ways we end up creating suffering, whether it's just for ourselves, for other people, or, for everybody involved. All right, let's kick it off with our first profile, the Aten Tapo. Now, the modern dictionary-style translation calls this a self-tormentor, and it's usually thought of as someone who's into extreme self-denial or really harsh practices. It kind of sounds like someone with intense self-discipline, maybe even something to admire. But that's only half the story.
This is where it gets really cool. When we go to the root meaning, we get a much more vivid and honestly a more powerful image. The word dapo doesn't just mean discipline. Its core meaning is literally to burn or to heat. So this isn't just about being tough on yourself. It's about generating this inner fire of anxiety or perfectionism or self-criticism that is literally consuming you from the inside out.
And this framework is just brilliant because it shows how that same destructive fire is just aimed in different directions for the other profiles. The other tormentor, they point that heat outward, causing pain for other people with their actions. And that third profile, they somehow manage to do both, creating a world of suffering for themselves and for everyone around them.
So, what's the bottom line here? Why did Pessa, the elephant trainer, immediately reject these 3 paths? The text says it's because they actively harm themselves or others, and those others are just people who want to be happy and avoid suffering, just like them. These paths are just fundamentally working against our most basic human drive for well-being.
So, let's move on to the 4th profile. This is the one that Pessa found so appealing, the one the text presents as the actual solution. This is the way to untangle that thicket and find that inner, open field. But it's really, really important to get this. This isn't about being passive or just trying to avoid conflict. No way. The text describes it as a very active, very deliberate path of cultivating specific inner skills and qualities. It's a journey you're on, not just some place you arrive at.
And this journey is built on 4 foundations, with each one supporting the next. It starts with just ethical conduct, a commitment to not cause harm. That creates a stable ground for contentment, being satisfied with what you have. Then you protect that contentment with sense restraint, so you're not constantly being pulled around by your desires. And all of this leads to a calm, centered mind, to mental stillness.
To explain this feeling of contentment, the text uses this absolutely beautiful metaphor. It says the person on the 4th path is like a bird that carries nothing but its own wings, wherever it goes. It's about this radical sense of lightness, of being unburdened by tons of wants and needs, and just finding that what's essential is enough. This whole path of cultivation eventually leads to what the text calls the jhanas, these deep states of mental stillness and clarity. You can think of them as a progression. You move from the simple joy that comes from letting go of things, deeper into a joy that's born from inner quiet, and you finally arrive at this profound, unshakable balance and awareness.
Now the text describes the ultimate state of the person on this path with this phrase, Brahma Bhutena Atmana Viharati. A common modern translation is that they live with a self that has become divine. And, that sounds pretty grand, maybe a little abstract.
But once again, when we look at the root meaning, we find something much more grounded, much more psychological. It means to dwell with an inner essence that has become fully integrated. It's a state of profound inner harmony, where all those tangled parts of yourself are no longer fighting each other. It's the perfect opposite of that tangled thicket.
So, let's bring this all together. What can this ancient framework offer us, right here, in our busy, modern lives? How do we actually go from feeling like a tangled thicket to living more like an open field?
The answer is right there in the structure of it all. The fourth path isn't just some personality type you either have or you don't. It's a practical instruction manual. The foundations, ethical conduct, contentment, mindfulness, these are the tools we can use right now to start untangling the knots of stress, anxiety, and conflict in our own lives.
And that brings us to our final thought. As you look at these 4 profiles, which one feels most familiar to you right now, in this phase of your life? And more importantly, what's just one small step, one tiny thing you could do to start walking toward that untangled path, starting today?